I wasn't trying to listen. I was just walking past the kitchen on the way to refill my tea. Frances was on the phone, pacing barefoot across the tile, one hand slicing the air like she always did when she was complaining. She doesn't even notice it. She said, "Her room stinks. It's like nursing home air. Heavy. Like old fabric and, I don't know, something medical." She laughed. A short, clipped sound I didn't recognize. I stopped mid-step. The chipped mug in my hand wobbled. I steadied it with my other palm, careful not to spill. I was standing just outside the doorway, not hidden, not sneaking, just there. Frances didn't look over, didn't lower her voice. It's seeping into the hallway. She continued, "I've sprayed the whole bottom floor, but it's like it clings to everything." My heart didn't race. It slowed. I backed up, quiet. The soles of my slippers made no sound on the hardwood as I returned to the room they let me stay in. They called it the guest room. I closed the door softly behind me. Not to hide, just to protect something that had been peeled open too fast. The tea in my mug had cooled. I set it down on the dresser, the same dresser where I kept my folded nightgowns, my vitamins. A framed picture of Frances when she was 7. Grinning, no front teeth, I looked at her little face. The face that once begged me to sing one more lullaby. The one who cried when I left for my night shift. The one who ran to me in the mornings with paint-stained fingers and whispered secrets. Now she walks past me without touching my arm. She thanks me for folding laundry like I'm a polite neighbor, not her mother. I picked up the mug again. The crack along the rim had widened slightly. I ran my thumb over it, then sat down in the armchair beside the window. Outside. The roses I planted last spring were starting to fade, dried at the edges, brittle from too much sun. Still there, still trying, just like me. I still keep the pink linen dress in a garment bag, tucked behind winter coats I no longer wear. I'd bought it 5 years ago, retirement gift to myself. A soft collar, delicate pleats, mother-of-pearl buttons down the front. I'd imagined wearing it to Sunday brunches with friends, maybe in some quiet cafe with real tablecloths and sunlight slanting through tall windows. I never wore it. Not once. The brunches never happened. The friends either passed on or moved away, and I moved into Frances's guest room with a suitcase and a promise that it was only for a little while. I'd had the stroke 3 months after turning 77. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to make walking unsteady and mornings uncertain. Frances had called immediately. "You shouldn't be alone. Mom, you'll stay with us. Just until things settle." I sold my condo. Quiet street, south-facing windows. The kind of place I imagined aging into. The money helped with the down payment on this house. Frances's name on the mortgage. My savings in the closing. At first, it felt like a shared home. I baked muffins. I watched the twins when Frances had meetings. I paid the water bill without being asked. Then my boxes were moved to the garage. My chair was removed from the living room. My name stopped appearing on the Wi-Fi password post-it. I became the silent hum in the background. The folded towels, the hot tea, the extra hand during school pickup when schedules got tight. They didn't mean harm. I told myself they were just busy. Stretched thin. Parenting was hard. Marriage was hard. I'd been there once, too. But even excuses can't warm cold stares or stop the way people look at you like you're taking up too much oxygen. I opened the closet now and then to check on the dress. Still smooth, still beautiful, still untouched. Some things wait too long for a moment that never arrives. I slipped the zipper down and touched the fabric, then slid the garment bag closed again. Tomorrow, I'd start organizing the drawers. Not for cleaning, just to see what I still owned and what still belonged to me. I used to keep the tomatoes by the kitchen window, Just a few pots Roma vines and a bit of basil in a blue ceramic bowl I'd brought from the old place. It made mornings easier. Something to tend before the house stirred. Before the rush of carpool, emails, and appointments swept through like a siren. But one afternoon, a day before Frances's book club was coming over, she passed by while I was watering. "Mom?" she said, not unkindly, but not kindly either. "Do you mind moving these?" She motioned toward the plants with the back of her hand. They don't really go with the aesthetic. You know, I nodded. I moved them, carried each one carefully behind the shed, where no one but the raccoons would see them. The soil's different there. Less sun. I had to fight mildew and squirrels, and the tomatoes didn't sweeten the way they used to. Still, I tended them daily. Watered. Pruned. Talked to them when no one was listening. Sometimes Lily would follow me out back, but mostly the twins stayed busy. They stopped hugging me around the same time I stopped being in their pictures. Now it's mostly small nods. A distracted, "Hi, Grandma." Once, I reached to fix Ben's collar and he flinched, not out of fear, but reflex, like I was someone he wasn't used to being touched by. I still bake. Muffins, banana bread, sugar cookies with lemon zest, things I know they once loved. I place them on the counter, warm, just as the kids come down for school. But they grab protein bars now. Cold things wrapped in plastic. Last week, Frances lit a candle outside my door, one of those designer ones, glass jar, minimalist label. The scent was labeled clean linen, but it smelled like bleach and apology. "Don't take it personally," she said when I asked. "Sometimes the hallway just feels stuffy." I nodded again. I seem to nod a lot in this house, but I do take it personally. I take it personally when they close the pantry door while I'm reaching for oatmeal, when they rewash the dishes I've already cleaned, when I offer help and get the smile that says no but won't say the word. The tomatoes are dying, I think, but I'll plant them again next spring. Maybe somewhere new. I opened the drawer next to my bed that night and took out the envelope marked title, Whitlow Property. I hadn't looked at it in a year, but it was still in my name, every page. I went into the office for stamps. That was all. Frances had mentioned she kept them in the middle drawer, just under the printer paper. I didn't think twice about opening it, but the folder caught my eye before I found the stamps. It was burgundy, thick, labeled in Frances's handwriting, estate planning. I knew better than to snoop, but something in me, maybe instinct, maybe just exhaustion, told me this wasn't something I should pretend not to see. I pulled it out, sat down at the edge of the desk. The first page was a printout of my life insurance policy. Highlighted. Circled. Notes in the margins. Expires 2028. Verify premium payment. Confirm beneficiary designation. The next, a series of brochures. Assisted living communities. Each one glossy and pastel-colored. I flipped through them. Beautiful lobbies. Smiling residents. One had a sticky note, mid-tier care. Decent reputation. Ask about Medicaid conversion. I kept flipping. Then I saw my name. On a printed version of my will, the one I'd updated after my stroke. The signature was mine, but the annotations weren't. Property value $472K, remaining pension benefits. And in Frances's handwriting, again. Next to the line about my small savings account, will need access if medical decline accelerates. I sat there for a long time, not angry, just emptied out. I took a breath, stood up, and went to my room. Pulled a manila folder from the bottom of my filing box and labeled it in thick black pen. When they forget I'm still alive. I copied everything. Each brochure, the annotated will, the notes on my insurance. I didn't confront her. There was no point. If she thought planning where I'd be stored next was reasonable, She wouldn't suddenly start asking where I wanted to be. I slipped the folder under my bed, between a box of scarves and a tin of saved birthday cards. Then I picked up the tea mug on my nightstand and walked to the kitchen. I boiled the water, let the steam rise slow and quiet. Then I sat by the window and watched the sun settle across the roof of the house I still legally owned. I'd spent 2 years trying to belong here again, but maybe it wasn't about fitting back in. Maybe it was about learning how to leave right this time. Gracie Morrison used to talk about the co-op all the time, before her cancer came back, before the hospital stays, before she stopped calling altogether. She said it wasn't like those places where you waited to die. It was where people went to live how they wanted, where no one measured your worth by how many chores you could still do or how quietly you stayed out of the way. It sat just off the edge of the parkway, hidden behind tall crepe myrtles and a wooden fence painted pale yellow. There were 10 units, each with a front porch and a garden bed the size of a dining table. The woman at the front desk greeted me like I was expected. Even though I hadn't called ahead, her name was Margot. She wore blue glasses and no makeup and didn't look at me like a number. "You're welcome to walk through the common room," she said. "There's no rush." I saw a table of women in their 70s playing Scrabble. One man reading a paperback on the couch by the fireplace. The scent in the air was lavender. Real lavender. Not a candle pretending. Outside, tomato plants were strung with twine and rosemary grew in planters. A corner shelf held paintbrushes, seed packets, and 3 pairs of gardening gloves. I didn't ask for a brochure. I asked for an application. Margot gave me one and said quietly, "There's one unit that just became available, if you're serious. I'll hold it for 24 hours. I said yes before I had time to doubt myself. When I got home, I called Mr. Teague, my lawyer since before Frances was born. Clarine. He said, "I figured I'd hear from you eventually." I told him what I'd seen in Frances's folder, what I planned to do. He didn't sound surprised, only careful. "You still own the house outright. Your name is on every page of the deed. That gives you full legal authority to sell or transfer it." "Good," I said. "Then I'd like to talk to a realtor." He gave me a name, someone discreet, professional. I wrote it down in my checkbook and stared at it for a long time. The next morning, I started in the closet. Not packing yet, just sorting. Shoes I hadn't worn in years, sweaters that still smelled like the cedar chest from my condo. My mother's quilt, a tin of sewing notions I kept even though my fingers no longer worked the way they used to. I labeled the first box kitchen, keep, the second donate, and the third, not for them. I wasn't sure when I'd make the move, but I knew now I could. And that was enough to keep going. By the end of the week, I had 17 boxes lined up under the bed. Frances had a conference in Asheville. The kids had a soccer tournament nearby. They left early Friday morning, all in a rush bags tumbling down the stairs. Cereal bowls left in the sink. Frances shouted for someone to grab the sunscreen. Then the door slammed, and silence followed. I waited 15 minutes, boiled water, drank tea. Then I opened the window and let the morning air touch my face. By 10 o'clock, Margot and a man named Elgin from the co-op had pulled into the driveway in an unmarked van. They didn't ask questions. They didn't comment on the house. They just helped me carry out 17 boxes, 2 suitcases, and the tomato pots from behind the shed. I didn't take everything, just what mattered. My quilt, the photo of Frances at age 7, the pink linen dress, my Bible, and a shoebox of letters from people who remembered me before I became wallpaper. I wiped down the kitchen counter, straightened the coffee mugs, closed the cabinet doors I knew Frances hated being left ajar. Then I placed a folded note in the center of the granite counter. It read, "The house has been sold. You have 30 days to move. Please don't call. I didn't leave a name, just my handwriting. Then I walked to the front door. I carried my mug in one hand, garden gloves in the other. The sun was soft across the lawn, the same lawn I used to mow myself before arthritis changed my grip. I didn't turn back, not even once. Margot opened the passenger door for me. I sat down, exhaled, and watched the house disappear in the side mirror as we pulled away. No one shouted after me. No one even knew I was gone, but by the time they returned, the silence would be deafening. And I'd already be unpacking the good china in a place where people said my name like it mattered. I was arranging my books by color on the shelves in my new kitchen when the first call came through. I didn't answer. By the third ring, the voicemail dinged. Then another, then another. I sat down with my tea. The light poured through the window like it had been waiting for me. Warm. Still. Margot stopped by with lemon scones from the bakery down the road. She didn't ask questions, just smiled and said, "You look lighter today." I didn't say what I'd done. Not yet. Maybe not ever. By evening, the messages changed tone. First frantic, then angry, then quiet. At 7:30. One came through while I was watching a documentary about beekeeping. Frances's voice tight, cracked. "You tricked us." I paused the show, took a sip of tea. I didn't trick anyone. I simply stopped playing the part they'd written for me without my consent. They had counted on my silence, my obedience, my reluctance to make waves. They never imagined I'd walk. They'd measured my value by how little I asked for, how small I made myself to fit inside their lives. But the thing about smallness is it builds pressure. And the thing about pressure is it always finds release. Frances must have found the note on the counter before they even took off their coats. I could picture her standing in the kitchen, rereading my handwriting, her voice rising while the kids hovered in the hallway, unsure who was in trouble. She'd never heard me raise my voice. She'd probably mistaken that for weakness. But strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it packs 17 boxes, signs one document, and leaves. I turned off the phone, set it in a drawer. Then I peeled open a journal I hadn't written in since Jorge died. On the first page, I wrote day 1. And beneath it, "No one asked me to shrink today. Tomorrow, I'd plant lavender in my window box." The old soil was still clinging to the roots, but the pot was mine. And the sun was enough. The knock was soft. 3 gentle taps, like someone who wasn't sure if they should be standing there at all. I opened the door and there he was, Caleb, backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes down. Sneakers scuffed. Taller than I remembered. I told Mom I had chess club. He said, "I don't. I just wanted to see if you were okay," before I could answer. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me. Not the polite hug teenagers give relatives at holidays, but something real, tight, quick, wordless. Inside, he looked around like the place belonged in a dream he hadn't been allowed to have. "It smells like cookies." He said, "It could." I said, "If we make some." He grinned. We stood in the kitchen, elbow to elbow. He cracked the eggs too hard, spilled flour on the floor, ate dough straight from the spoon. I didn't correct a thing. "You were always there," he said once, quietly, while the cookies baked, at every game, at all the school things. I never really noticed. I'm sorry. I didn't need him to say that. But it landed like something soft after months of stone. I poured 2 glasses of milk and slid the warm tray onto the table. We sat and talked about nothing big his art class. A joke from science. A girl named Jenna who drew wolves in her notebook. He laughed with his whole face, like he hadn't in a while. 2 hours passed before he stood up again. He grabbed a second cookie for the road and slipped it into his hoodie pocket. At the door, He looked back and asked, "Can I come again next week?" "Anytime," I said, "but only if you want to." He nodded, a quiet kind of promise in his eyes, and walked down the path back toward wherever he had to lie next. I closed the door. My kitchen still smelled like vanilla and brown sugar, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's life. I felt like someone worth visiting. My lavender bloomed early this year. Maybe it was the new soil. Maybe it was the quiet. Every morning, I pulled open the sunroom curtains and sat in the armchair by the window with my tea and a pen. Sometimes I journaled. Sometimes I sketched. Sometimes I just sat. The neighbors waved when they passed by. Margot brought me a basil plant. Harold from 2 doors down lent me a mystery novel with all the plot twists underlined in pencil. At lunch, I sat with people who asked questions and waited for the answers. No one corrected my stories. No one sighed when I took a little too long to finish a thought. One afternoon, I joined a watercolor class in the rec room. I hadn't painted since high school, but my hands remembered more than I expected. My first picture was a lavender stem in a chipped mug. They pinned it on the wall on Thursday. The phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then again on Friday. By Saturday, I picked up. Frances's voice was soft, but laced with that old urgency. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry you felt that way. I never meant to make you think you weren't welcome. I was just overwhelmed. You could have talked to me." There was a pause. Then she added, "You didn't have to make it such a statement." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain the months I'd spent trying to stay small. I didn't list the candles outside my door, or the brochures about places meant to make me disappear. I simply said, "I am no longer available to be disrespected." Then I set the phone down and stepped outside to check the lavender. It had doubled in size, the color deeper than before. I brushed my fingers gently across the flowers and watched a bee land on the tallest stem without hesitation. The air smelled like something I remembered from childhood, clean and bright and earned. This house wasn't bigger than the last one, but it had windows that let the light in, and not once had I been asked to stay out of sight.